All right, so create strong poses. I'm gonna give you guys this early. Normally do a couple more poses for practice, but I wanna have you guys um, have the entire day to kind of get these poses out quick, get critiques, and really everyone here should get critiques for these poses. Now, what is the importance of this project? Number one, it's the end of week 3. And you're doing 4 strong poses. You can see the examples of the 4 poses that are completed in this video right here. Now, yes, it's the end of week 3. It's showing off what you've learned, but we are actually going to be taking these poses 1 and 2, and we're going to be animating them next week. So if your poses 1 and 2 do not work properly, if they're not posed well, if they're not in the correct position, then that is going to adversely affect week 4. So my suggestion to you is to make sure you get these critiqued today and get input. If it doesn't work, go back and do it again. If you have to do pose 1 5 times before you get it right, then it's 5 times before you get it right. You want to make sure that it's good, that it is working. Because if it's not, you're going to have to make changes and fixes on Wednesday before you start blocking out your animation. Because if poses 1 and 2, if your first pose and your last pose are not posed well, that will definitely affect your animation. So we're going to have all day to do this, but keep in mind, right, what is your timing on these poses? 15 minutes per pose. You got 4 poses. So you should be able to knock out these poses and have us take a look at them and then make any corrections. In essence, I'm giving you guys an opportunity here to do really well on the Strong Poses project. All right, so there is reference. There's a PDF in here. I'll kind of scroll down a little bit into the there we go. Scroll down a little bit into the instructions. Inside the instructions, you see there is a Maya file. Let me save this here. And inside the Maya file, just a real quick setup again, just you can see some things that you might want to get rid of. And when I say might, you definitely should. And one of those is the FKIK pluses on the rig. Just let's get rid of those right away from the start. I'm going to grab the God node down at the bottom, select, drag over the God node, go over into the channel box, find FKIK viz, and 0 to go off. So I put a 0 in and return. That's taken care of. I'm just going to check show. It looks pretty clean here. I'm going to spacebar out to all 4 views. Looks like my side view needs to be set up. So I'm going to set up my side view, turn on the grid, click on show. It looks pretty good, but I need my NURBS curves on and surfaces. Okay, so we're set there. I'm going to go into front Z. Front Z looks pretty good. Check show, just check show. Yep, nope, tear off show, none. Curve surfaces polys. And let's see, this top view, I'm going to use the top view here for my perspective. So I'm going to go panels, perspective, and then to perspective. So I have my perspective camera. Check show. Looks like everything is still on. So I'm going to tear that menu off. Say none, curve surfaces polys. Okay, I'm also going to check my render settings, right? Because this is a new file. So I'm going to open up my render settings and make sure it's at HD 540 right now. I need to have it at what? HD 720. So I set that preset to HD 720 and I close that. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to save this scene And I might as well put my last name on it. So that way, you know, as I'm creating this and making Play Blast, it's all set up for me now. Let's see. Well, I probably need to set this up a little further. I notice right here, it's only 24 frames, right? If we look down here in our instructions, you're gonna see we're gonna be doing 4 poses. And you're doing all 4 poses in sequence, and you're gonna be using the Play Blast camera as your camera. You wanna hold each frame for 72 frames, which is 3 seconds. So we're gonna do similar to what we've already done, right? We've already done this. Key 1, 73, 145, 217. We want a total of 289 frames. So let's go in there and add 289 frames. All right. And then I can grab that rig and let's see, so go out to 73. We're gonna go out to 145, 217, and I have the rig keyed for each pose. All right, so that's set up. And I got my naming convention set up, so that's good. All right, so that's pretty good. I could do a file save on that. All right, so we also have a 4 poses PDF explained, so you can open that one up. When I take a look inside, it gives us just the same information we just saw there. You're gonna hold each pose for 72 frames. And you're gonna put your keyframes on 173, 145, 217. And then when you're done, you'll turn in your Maya file, Play Blast, using the Play Blast camera. So let's take a look at our poses 1 and 2. So poses 1 and 2, they go together. That's why they're poses 1 and poses 2. It's the first pose, it's the last pose. So inside this PDF, I want to give you some information about the information that I'm giving you inside this reference, because if I just gave you pictures, there wouldn't be any me drawing over it. So I did some drawing over. I didn't do everything. And so there's a few things in here that are very important. One of the first that I'll point out is the vertical lines. So the vertical lines, right here, right, and right here. Okay, so these nice vertical lines right here and right here. These kind of represent the center of gravity, where that hip should be. And it's a very helpful kind of tool, because I want you to have the center of gravity in the correct spot. If it's not, if your center of gravity is over here and it's not pushed over the correct foot, that's going to adversely affect your grade, because I'm going to be looking at the 3 basics of the pose: foundation, center of gravity, line of action, right? So if one of those is missing, that's pretty major to a pose, right? If this pose is center of gravity is over here, well, it's not leaning into the correct position. So I've given you guys this on all the poses to know where you need to have those hips. Now what's nice is you can kind of think of it like this. Let's see, it could be this green arrow, because if I select the hips and I have translate on, right, you can see right here, see how that arrow goes straight up? Okay, so that's kind of giving us an idea. And I use plus or minus if I want to make that bigger or smaller. This tells us where that center of gravity is, but it also helps us see the line of action through that torso. And right now you can see how linear it looks. Whereas right here, you can see that line goes up, and you can see how the line of action, there's a nice twist and tilt in that torso off of that center cog. Now this is why I have you guys make that hands and hips button, and you make it in the correct order, because if you use hands and hips and you click on the button and you have the translate tool on, you'll see you get that nice arrow. So that arrow kind of helps you when you're creating your pose. Let's say you needed to lean out over that red foot. You grab that hands and hips. Well, right now the center of gravity is not over that red foot, but if I do this, right, now you can see through the center of that cog, kind of aiming down just right over that red heel. And you can kind of look back at the example and say, yep, that's where that's supposed to be, right over that area. Right, same thing with the pose too. You can see that that line is right at that heel of the left foot. All right, let's see back a little bit. Okay, so that's center of gravity. Down in the legs, I kind of did a little draw over the legs so that you can see that the legs are not super stiff. They might look stiff, but you want to do things to kind of give them a nicer line of action. And so you can see between the right and the left legs how I kind of gave that illusion through that gesture. Now, both of the feet on both poses, there are some differences than what we see, or things that I want you to be aware of. So let's take a look at pose one. Pose one, the right foot is rotated out into the lean. Now that fits with what the pose looks in pose one. But what you can't see on the left foot, it's hard to tell. I just want you to kind of look down here at the foot. We can actually see a little bit of that back heel of that left foot. So we have the toe here. And so what's happening, if you could see it from this other side looking this direction, you would actually have a foot that is on the ball of the foot. So it'd be like this. So this is the ground, right? So it's rotated up on the ball of the foot. Okay, and we can actually see a little bit of that back heel here. All right, so just be aware of that, because if you, what I find is sometimes people will turn the foot in this way and it just doesn't look right. You don't want to turn it out so far to point this direction, but you do want to have a little bit of twist on that foot. All right. On pose two, let's take a look at the left foot. Now, if you look at the live action reference, notice how the foot aims straight at the camera. Do you guys see that? Now, this is actually something that is kind of, I'd say, part and parcel to the fact that the model was kind of nervous, you know, and thinking about a lot of different things, and got into the pose and was a little bit uncomfortable. Now I can forward this to you guys because I know who the model is, and I know that when this model was posing, that you know, it did feel a little bit stiff, and so while there is that stiffness in there, we have to think about, well, what would we do if we got into this pose, right? Well, I would almost, you know, you guys can try this yourself. If you stand up and, you know, face this direction, you know, like a T pose basically, with your feet like this, you know, just stand up like that basically, right? And if you try to lean over this foot, your blue foot, what you'll find is that you're actually going to fall pretty quick. But if you rotate that foot this direction, of course you don't want to forget that knee, right? If you rotate that foot out like this, you actually can lean quite a bit further over that foot because you have the stability of that foot turned out. So having said that, right, that's why I kind of did a little drawing here. See how I did a little drawing? Just to remind you to turn, to basically rotate that foot out into the lean. If you have it facing the camera, then you didn't listen to my instructions and you didn't listen to the way the body should pose itself, right? You can see it here in pose 1, right? And so this is something that you have to, number 1, observe and be aware of. And unless it's something that's definitely a part of that pose, right? Where it's like it needs to be there, maybe like a ballerina pose, right? We can see that because that's happened before, right? But this one's not. And I'm giving you the verbal exchange to tell you what you need to do, but I also have the drawing here to kind of just point that out. Okay, let's take a look at the right leg. The right leg is not on the tip of the toe, it's actually on the ball of the foot again. So this foot pose, again, just like the other poses, you want to kind of have that ball of the foot flat on the ground. Okay, that's not a very good flat on the ground. It looks like it's so flat like that on the ground, and then the ball of the foot like that, rotate it up. Okay, and that's going to show weight on this leg still. All right. Okay. Another thing to look at is the hips. Now, I would say for most of these, in fact, I actually have three videos to take you guys through pose 1. They're about 2 minutes each. And I actually leave the cog flat, but I do a little twist in the cog, right? But I leave the cog flat and I use the hip adjust to tilt the hip down, right? So the flower, the one with the flower, this one, right? I use that to tilt that hip down. Now I tilt the hip down towards the foot that's extending out. So in pose 1, it tilts down towards the blue foot, and in pose 2, it tilts down towards the red foot. Now when you're doing this, make sure that you are aware of the leg in the front, right? So it's the right leg on pose 1 and it's the left leg on pose 2. Make sure you don't lock that out. That's why I do the foundation first. I pose the feet first, then I move up to center of gravity and line of action, but I always look back at the feet. Okay. All right, let's see. Another kind of helpful thing here is the hands. Make sure you have the hands posed on the hips. And when I say on the hips, I mean on the hips. So if you're this pose 2, look, see where if you tilted that hip down, then don't have that hand on the waist. Make sure you get it on the hip and make sure those hands are posed as well. I will take into account unposed hands or hands that are not posed well. And I think on pose 1, this is a good example here because this one, when I look at this reference, right? This reference, if you almost look, this hand is here and this hand is here, they're almost parallel. That's just not working, right? Because if this hip is up here, it's going to be, this hand is going to be on this hip. Well, if this hip is dropped, the hand is going to be lower, right? So this hand is going to be a little bit lower and posed on the hip. Now, again, make sure that you are posing on the hip, not on the waist. Don't put your hands in this area, right? Pose them on the hips. All right. Twist and rotation through the body. Make sure, again, don't tilt your cog into the lean. So what you don't want to do at all, like I said before, you can get away with just twisting the cog. But if you tilt the cog down, that is an option. You can, but just make sure you're tilting it in the direction of the foot that's extending, right? Don't tilt your cog this direction, because if you do, you're going to get a very stiff torso. Okay, if you tilt it down this direction, this works because then you can counter that twist or that straight, right? Because remember, it's going to have that back and a straight, and you'll counter that twist into this pose. So it's actually going to give a nice line of action through there. If you leave your cog flat, you're still going to, because this is where the back will be. And when you do your twist and rotation, you're going to get into this position. So it's still going to work well. But what you don't want to do is tilt it into the lean. Same thing with this side. Don't tilt your cog that direction. Make sure if you're going to do it, make sure you tilt it down. Okay. If you do use that and you tilt your cog, be careful about locking out the foot on either side. Okay. Okay, again, another thing I use the vertical line for, I can see where the head is compared to that line. So when I get my center of gravity into this position and we're looking at this arrow going up, if my head is back here, then I know that I don't have a good line of action through the body and I don't have my pose set up correctly. While we're here on pose 2, this hand is not a tomahawk on the head. Imagine he's looking this direction like, hey, what's that? So it's kind of covering the eyes from the sun to look off a little bit further. Okay. All right. So positioning of poses 1 and 2. This is really important. We're going to have to make sure that our poses 1 and 2 are in the correct position. And this is one of the things that we'll do from the very start. So pose 1 is going to be further to the left-hand side of the screen. And pose 2 is going to be further to the right. It's not going to be in the position that we see here and here, but we can get an idea that from pose 1 to pose 2, there's going to be a step from pose 1 to pose 2. So the left foot is going to eventually step over to the position that it is in pose 2. And the right foot is actually going to move from its position to its final position in pose 2. So where should we start, or where should these poses be at? Well, we can get an idea based off of the background. If you see these little things in the background, if we look at this right here, we can tell that there's no other circles behind that calf. So it looks like these are the 2 circles here that are right here. So if we look at where that foot is then, right, the tip of the toe, it's right about at that center point. So if we take that center point down on pose 2, then that means this spot right here is where the front of this toe is on pose 1, right? So it's hard to tell where this would be, but I'm assuming that this one would probably be right about here, which means it takes a step to this position here. So pose 1 and pose 2 need to be adjusted. So I can kind of start this by grabbing my hands and hips, my knees, and my feet, and just go on, I gotta make a pose 1, don't I? Yep, pose 1. Go to pose 1 and just move pose 1 so that it's right about there for the start. And then pose 2, I can take pose 2 and move this to right about there. And that's at least a start. Now, when I finish my poses, I might have to adjust a little bit, but the idea is that pose 1 will be here, pose 2 will be here, okay? All right, so any questions about poses 1 and 2? So let's take a look at 3 and 4. All right, so 3 and 4 is the character seated on a chair and then standing up. So I didn't give you any drawovers as far as through the body, but I did give you guys the vertical lines to kind of point out that center of gravity. Where should that lean be? So notice in the seated pose, the lean is over the left leg. Now, what I'm looking for is a good lean and twist in the torso. So what I don't want you to do is just get the torso seated into the position that you see here and then rotate the back forward without any twist. It won't look as strong. What else am I looking for in the seated pose is weight. I want to feel like the character is seated on the object, and I also want to see weight in the body. So where am I going to be looking at this? 2 places. One is the left arm, where the elbow is resting on the leg and the hand is bent down, kind of supporting the head, right? So I might actually, kind of play with this a little bit more when I do my final. I might try to push that out a little bit more if I can to really kind of accentuate that lean over that leg a little more, okay? Then the other weighted area is the right arm, and I want to see that hand resting on that thigh, the arm resting on the thigh, and I want to see that wrist broken and the hand kind of dangling down a little bit. And you can kind of put a real kind of nice pose on those fingers to show that off. Okay, both feet will be flat on the ground for this pose. The next pose, the character is kind of, he's been called out or something, and he's kind of aggressive in this one. He's like, hey, what's that? You know, what are you talking about? Whatever, right? So this pose is kind of standing up and thrusting forward, right? The back foot, the right foot, is pushed up on the ball of the foot, similar to pose 2. I say similar. Again, just because I didn't draw this here, don't forget about the hips on this, right? This hip is going to be dropped down, aiming towards this red foot, okay? So be aware of that. There is a twist through the torso and a slight lean. When you do the arms, make sure that they are not symmetrical. So sometimes people look at this and this is what they get when they see it. So they kind of pose their arms like this. Well, this is symmetrical, and that's not how this pose is. If you actually look at the arm, the elbow's in here, and then this is out and turned down. So it's elbow in. It's going to look nicer doing that. And then you can bring this one up. All right. Also think about, what do these poses look like from the side? And you got to do this for poses 1 and 2 as well, right? What does it look like from this way? So if you're looking at that, this left arm, that left arm should be a little further back, and maybe this right arm a little further forward. Just be aware of that. Be careful about how far you move this red foot out. Sometimes I feel like people pose this red foot way out here, like the character stepping out. We're not, if you're looking at it from this way, you're seeing a profile of the body, right? You're not seeing it this direction. So be careful with that. Every once in a while, I'll get somebody who kind of turns that pose so far that it's almost like if we were looking at it this way, then, you know, we're not seeing the full side of the body like that. It's a lot thinner than that, okay? Because we're seeing it from that from the side of the body there. So make sure you're looking at the side view to strengthen your poses for all of your poses. Definitely 1, 2, and 4. Okay. All right. So poses 3 and 4, if I wanted to set these up, I'll go to 3, and I'm actually going to move 3. I'm going to get it to the box and then move it back right about there. And then I'm just going to rekey that same position again at 217. Now I can reposition my feet and get them where I need to, but at least poses 3 and 4 are in the same area. Now, when I'm seated, this is what I was saying, just a little hint to kind of help you get a better pose on this. I'm going to show you guys from the top. Ortho top. Okay, so here's the box right here. Don't turn the character to sit on the box like that and then just rotate him forward. It's not going to look as good. You're better off getting the character seated, okay, so that the cog is still kind of facing forward this direction, and then use the back to twist and tilt. Then you're going to get a nicer lean over that blue leg, okay? Because you're going to take that blue leg and move it out and do its correct position over here, right? Where he's seated, and that foot's going to be rotated out, etc. Right? But you're going to get a nicer twist on that. Then if you take the cog and turn it into the tilt of the back, right? I guess I'm just pointing out this to say, don't give everything away with the cog, right? Don't give all the twist away with the cog. So if you're going, well, Dan, what if I wanted to do a little bit like that? And then finish it off with the back, right? So what if I gave a little bit of twist in the cog for where he's seated and then finished it off with the back? Oh, that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? I just don't want you guys to just use the cog to get into the final position for everything above the waist. Do you guys understand that? I hope you do. If you don't, no worries, because I'm going to point it out to you when you ask for critiques. So anything I can do to help you guys create nice, strong poses for this assignment, okay? Don't forget, do not ignore the side view, all right? If you do, your poses are going to be lacking, okay? I think that's it. That is our setup. So I'm gonna leave you guys to this. Well, no, not 100%, right? Because this is what I want you guys to do. For pose one, right underneath the instructions in 3.4, do you see where it says 3 steps to block out a pose? It says foundation, center of gravity, line of action. Okay, I have 3 videos here. They're about 2 minutes each, I think. Maybe one will be 5 minutes, I don't know. I want every one of you guys to watch these videos and make pose 1. Okay, this will guide you through a good pose 1. Now, if after you do watch these videos and create pose 1, if your pose 1 still does not look strong, I will, in your critique, I will point out the things that need to be fixed. If I don't see anything that I've explained in these 3 videos inside that inside your pose, I'm going to send you back to these 3 videos, right? Because they start the pose with the foundation, go up to the center of gravity and finish off, and it goes through that pose, right? So that is pose 1. And then you could take that same idea, because remember, we're always thinking about foundation, center of gravity, and line of action. You could take that same thought process and then do pose 2. And then the same thought process, do pose 3. Same thought process, do pose 4. Okay. All right. Underneath, I do have a checklist for strong poses. And, you know, this is the simplification, right? The 3 steps are the simplification. The checklist is refining, okay? So the checklist goes back to foundation. Are the feet, make sure the feet are not locked out. Are they posed? How you would get into the pose, and do they show weight? Your center of gravity, make sure your center of gravity is pushed over the correct foot. Make sure you check the opposite foot so that it's not locked out. If you don't know what locked out means, then please ask again, right? Locking out the foot means that the rig is being pulled away from the controller. So on the foot, it would be, when I rotate, like right there, I just locked out the blue foot. So it doesn't seem like it, but see how it's pulling that blue foot up as I rotate this? See that? That foot's not posed. It's being pulled away from the box, right? So I want to make sure that it's not, right? And that's with rotation. So I can do it with rotation. I can also do it with translate, right? If I translate something up or down too high, if I pull it away, right? If I go up, then I can pull the feet out of the box. So be careful. I can actually translate it sideways too and pull it out. See that? I can pull it right out of the box. That is locking out, right? Same thing I can do with those hands. Now, how do I know that it's not locked out? Well, it's either in, once that ankle starts to bend, I can tell. So let's say I get my pose, and I'm going to use the roll. And I like my roll angle to be at 55. So if I actually, on the feet, let's see, I would go into the foot and I'd find roll angle, and I'm just going to select all my keys and make this 55. And then I'm going to grab the other foot. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just affecting the roll angle, right here, roll angle in channel box. See where it says 40? Going in the right leg, I find my roll angle, and I'm selecting all these keys, and I'm going to say 55. Now it's going to change all of these to 55. You'll see right here in my channel box, it's now 55. Why do I like that? Because I can get a better pose using my roll if my roll angle is at 55. Okay, so now You can see that. I got that nicer pose there. So that foot's posed, but now I'm going to pull it up too high and lock it out. You see how now it's pulls away? So as I bring it back down, I can tell it it's locked out the moment that my ankle starts to bend or my knee. All right, so again, that's going to be extremely important, making sure that the rig is not locked out. Pull vectors, don't forget about your knees and your elbows, okay? Balance, make sure you're checking your ortho views, which is your front and your side. Beware of overusing controls. Don't use a ton of hip swinger and do not overuse your hip swinger and your cog too much, right? Make sure that if you use your hip swinger from one pose to another, make sure that you zero it out before you start the next pose, okay? And in here, we already keyed it. If you keyed, then everything's at 0. You should be okay, but just be aware of that, right? So if I start to move my hip swinger around, then I got to know that that is also affected by my cog, okay? Make sure you use your foot controls correctly. Think about the point of focus of the pose, the line of action, opposing forces, asymmetry, negative space, readable silhouette. Make sure your hands are posed. Make sure they're posed before, right away, right? Get them in that. Within that 15 minutes, right? Make sure, I'd say it again because it's important, make sure the arms aren't locked out. Okay. And I think that's good. There is down here mel buttons. Again, if you forget how to do that, I have the video again, how to make those mel buttons. And there's 2 that you should be using, hands and hips and the back, which is the spine and the chest, okay? And just another reminder as far as, you know, things to not move or translate, right? Don't translate any of the rings. We'll go with the feet. Right here, like all these rings, do not translate these. These are all rotation only, don't translate them. Don't translate the blue circle inside your cog. Don't translate your spine or your chest. Don't translate your fingers. Don't translate your head and your neck, because any one of those will cause problems with your rig. Okay, and if you do something that damages the rig, that does affect your grade. Okay, all right. Well, then that's it. I'm going to leave you guys to it.